Lucifer and Beelzebub and Satan are the same demon, and he's the demon of fear.
The demons have a conscience.
Yes,
and they feel shame.
And every evil thing they've ever done will be known by everybody.
We're talking about the elites.
Some of the elite that are at the top are actually involved in occult activity, and those people know we're actually dealing with spiritual. Their activity in the occult is getting demons actually involved. They fully know that. In fact, their knowledge of this stuff is almost on the same level as mine.
Are we approaching end times?
The situation for the Antichrist is just about present.
An exorcist priest shares demons, shares his thoughts on the mark of the beast, shares his thoughts on the third temple being built to Shawn Ryan. It's absolutely a fascinating conversation, and I'm gonna give him my commentary from a evangelical Protestant person and the differences, I would say, compared to his beliefs as a Catholic priest. Let's get into it, guys. This is fascinating stuff.
You mentioned demon of fear. Is it what is the demon of fear?
What is the demon of fear?
Technically speaking, it's actually Beelzebub, which, as you know from your interviews with Dan, it's the Lucifer and Beelzebub and Satan are the same demon, and he's the demon of fear because of the fact that fear is defined as the perception of a future evil over which you cannot overcome. So there's some evil that's coming down the pike. You see it coming, and intellectually, and you can't get away from it. Well,
whether the devil and Beelzebub are the same, or the spirit of fear is Beelzebub, but like the spirit of fear is that not of God, because God has given us the spirit of love and power and a sound mind. He's not given us a spirit of fear. Fact number one. So if you have a spirit of fear, that's demonic. It's some other spirit.
In my dealings with him, he says he lives in, Beelzebub says he lives in chronic fear. And
it's
the
crazy
reason
that he
lives in
says,
chronic fear, he said, is because, and it's also the same reason why
in
he's
his dealings
exhausted.
with
He spends
Beelzebub.
all this time hyper-focusing on everything that's possibly going on, because he said God broadsides me a lot of times. So a lot of times I'm focusing on this particular thing, and then the next thing I know, I just get broadsided because they do not have access to the divine economy of grace. They don't know what grace is God's going to give to people, and as a result, the demons get taken to the woodshed. And so he's fearful of getting basically beat up in relationship to that. The other part about it is that they have a conscience.
This is fascinating.
And their conscience bothers them. And they also have a sense of shame for what they actually do. They even mention
the demons have a conscience.
Yes.
And they feel shame.
And they feel shame. They know what they've done is wrong.
Obviously, they would know they're against God. But I've also heard other ideas saying that the demons think they're going to win. Is that true or not? I don't know. But obviously, the devil and his angels have to submit to the authority of Christ.
Much in session. And that is actually, other than the fact that they don't get to see God, that's their greatest suffering, is this pang of conscience of the evil that they've actually done. Beelzebub's even admitted to me in session that every time he gets someone to fall, he gets a sadistic delight out of it.
Dang.
But it increases his shame in knowing that he's that much lower of an individual for having done that. And so part of their fear, one of their massive fears, is being revealed or found out about their interior lives in relation to human beings. Just as we would, if people found out our deepest, darkest secret, we would feel shame or embarrassed. Yeah. They have that same thing, but it's even worse for them because of the fact that they know that a final judgment's going to come, where not just at our private judgment when we die, but God's going to assemble everybody at the final judgment. And every evil thing they've ever done will be known by everybody. So they have a tremendous amount of fear. Shame is defined as fear of being perceived as lowly.
That's interesting that they feel shame. So would it be possible for a demon to come to Christ and to
no?
That's a wild thought.
Once it's in, it's over for eternity.
It's a little bit different because I love how he explains this. They 100% know the spirituality, the consequences of the rebellion. There's no going back. Like, they've already been judged, the fallen angels. And there's a lot of different ideas of what these demons are, whether they are spirits of the Nephilim or just fallen angels themselves or some other rebellious angels. We don't know.
When they make their choice, well, I should say this, none of their sorrow or even their fear, but none of their sorrow is to a purpose of amendment. They have no intention of getting their act together. Wow. So basically when they made their choice, because they were created, when they were first created, the first instance, When they were created into a state of full comprehensive knowing. So they actually knew who they were, what their nature was, because they could actually see their nature. Whereas human beings, we have to infer what human nature is. They could actually see it. By that they also knew what their assigned task was. God created them for a specific task, a mission, you could say, that they had to do. And that mission determines that means that one angel is actually essentially different from another one because they have a natural law. They have inclinations along that line. So, but then he also created them. He infused all the knowledges of the essences of created things that were going to ever exist. They didn't know the particulars that would unfold over history necessarily, but they did know all the essence. So they know what a tree is, what a human being is. This is why they're so adept at taking people out, because they understand human nature so well. Okay, so they were created in this state, but that means that unlike human beings, we got to wake up and drink some coffee and kind of get our act together before we can actually think anything of any depth, right? Well, not with them. They were instantaneously fully comprehended all.
They are not bound by our flesh. They're spiritual beings only. We are human and have a dying body. They do not.
They know what their task was. They know what the reward would be if they were faithful to that, which would basically get to see him for all eternity and be an eternal happiness. Or they would also know what their eternal punishment would be if they did not do it. That means they had full, absolute comprehension. Now, the reason God cuts us slack as human beings is because we're stupid, right? We are. We're just stupid. And so that's why God's like, okay, you're stupid. And so when we're contrite, it's because our wills aren't fixed. Because when we make a choice, we don't have that full kind of comprehension they did. We just later we realize, oh, that was just dumb, right? And so because of our lack of knowledge, we don't have that same level of knowledge where they had full comprehension.
Yep. The Bible says that we will fully know him one day when we get, obviously, to be reunited with him. But right now, no, we don't.
Now, St. Thomas says that their will is proportionate to their intellect, which basically means that when their intellect understands something, when they make a choice, it's proportionate to that thing, which meant that when they made their choice of being with God or not, of doing their task or not, they were all in. And that means their will became completely fixed in malice.
Wow.
In fact, it's funny because I actually had a case where this kind of thing came out, because I said, okay, so let me get this straight. So you were I was dealing with this demon. So you were created to have the beatific vision, yeah. And you were created to have this phenomenal task of enlightening people's minds, yeah. And you were created to have all these perfections that would surround that, and you'd be able to influence people for the good, yeah. And you knew if you didn't do this, you'd end up in hell for all eternity, yeah, and it would bother you for all eternity, that you would just hate yourself and have, because when they rejected their task, remember, their task is who they are. And that means, but they made their choice, it was perfect self-hatred, and you knew you'd hate
That's
yourself for all
crazy.
eternity, yeah. And I said, and you'd do it again? And he said, yeah, I would.
Why?
Wow.
And basically what it comes.
This is the one thing that, be careful, like he speaks with a lot of authority, which is interesting, but a lot of times he's speaking from Saint Thomas Aquinas or something like that, like some elder that wrote this book, which again, they're not 100% sure. They don't know exactly, so he's just quoting them. Sometimes he says it completely as a fact, which I don't think so 100%. So comment down below your thoughts, because this is fascinating stuff.
Is there was a perfection that they saw, that they wanted, that wasn't part of their particular nature that they wanted. And they had to be willing to sacrifice that in order to have the beatific vision, which is a greater good. So
Essentially, the downfall of all people and all beings are pride, wanting to be like God. They can't do that.
the lesser good for the greater good. And they were unwilling to sacrifice that particular thing. So they literally chose a figment of their imagination, because they knew they'd never have it. They chose that over
figment.
reality.
How many times do we do that? Figment of our imagination we chase.
Real quick, back to aliens and anomalous activity. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it several times, and I believe it too, that all of that stuff is from a spiritual realm.
Yes.
And so what I want to ask is, when we're talking about the elites, when we're talking about the people that are getting us to focus on the distraction,
Right.
away from, in this particular example, away from the Epstein files and everything that went on there, onto aliens and UFOs. So the people that are in on this, do they know do they know what aliens are, or do they have any knowledge that we don't have, or are their minds being controlled by a demonic force? And so
Yeah.
they're carrying out a agenda and they don't even realize it.
I think there's levels. So
Okay.
some of them are that lower level, which you just mentioned, the last part. Other people actually do know that, there's nothing out there. This is just, and the diabolic. The other thing is, too, is some of the elite that are at the top are actually involved in occult activity. And those people know that we're actually dealing with spiritual issues here.
Yep.
Or spiritual realities. One of the things that happens, I've never had it because they know I don't buy it. Because demons, they know a lot because they've been watching us for our whole lives, right? So they know what our general patterns are and what we're likely to think and believe. Although they do sometimes throw stuff up just to see if it'll stick. But generally they know it. And so they know I don't buy any of the alien stuff. And so they've never done this to me. But I do know other exorcists where
I've heard this.
they would, in session, they would actually, once the demon manifested, they would manifest
Insane.
and literally looking like an alien with the eyes.
I wonder if that's just all part of their deception, just to get people to think about aliens. Like Joe Rogan has this vision, kind of like Gray's, this dream about Gray's. It just kept him up all night. And that's what I said. I just think it's a demon trying to get people to be persuaded that they're from the future or from a different galaxy trying to help us. That's not always the reality, though. It's disturbing.
Small mouth and the whole bit, turning gray. And they even call themselves gray. And they try and lie to the exorcist by
Weird.
saying, oh, well, we're not angels, good angels, and we're not bad angels. We're not demons. We're kind of in the middle. We're neither good nor bad. No, dude, you're just a demon.
You're just
right?
a
Because
demon.
when you start talking to them, it's all that is a diversionary tactic, which they do in the sessions. So just as we're seeing this play out itself on a grander scale in the world with the whole alien thing, they'll try and do that in session
That's
where they're just trying to
crazy.
distract you by something that they know that is not true, but they're hoping you'll believe it's true because then from there they can manipulate you.
When you say there's different levels, do you have to pass through each level, or do you just arrive at a level? So, like, if you are in the occult, do
Yeah.
you just arrive at that level where you're doing satanic rituals, or do you graduate?
Some graduate. Some are actually they're trained in this stuff from the very beginning. Sometimes they're actually groomed. They'll watch them in college, or they'll watch them and then they'll introduce them into this through various secret societies and things of that sort. They'll get them into engaging in the occult. There's a
Dang.
few of these people, not many of them, that are actually part of a pedigree or history that extends back to the late 1500s, 1600s, where the occult practices has been in their family lineage literally for 300 to 400 years.
Wow.
And so they're so proficient in the knowledge about how this stuff works and what is actually involved. They know that there's demons and God, etc. And they know that their activity in the occult is getting demons actually involved. They fully know that. In fact, their knowledge of this stuff is almost on the same level as mine.
That's insane to say. To think that there's people, and this makes total sense when you think about some elites possibly always disturbingly doing creepy stuff. They know the spiritual ramifications of this. They know the darkness behind it. They know why they're doing it. I think there are people 100% fully knowing what they're doing. And then there's a lot of people who are just following their own fleshly desires, not knowing that it is a demonic practice or a wicked practice. So it's a both, I would say.
And so they have a full understanding of it, but they're on the side of evil. And so
Yep.
they tend to raise their children generation after generation within that particular occult set of practices.
Wow.
I mean, where do these people think they go when they die?
Well, they know they go to hell.
Why would you want to go to hell?
Well,
True.
because they have a false impression, because the demons will leave this with this, is that if they do a lot of evil in this life, which empowers the demons, then that will give them power when they get to hell. And so when they have that, and they actually believe the exercise of their power.
Do they think that it's going to be a kingdom in hell? Like, just like the underground for Hades, where there's a ruler there? I don't think that's what hell's going to be like, brothers and sisters.
Will be something that they can then have a kind of a comfortable hell, or it's not going to be as bad because I have all this power. And part of it is that they just have an aversion towards things that are good anyway.
Jesus defeated death, and he has the keys to heaven and hell. No one's going to be in charge in hell besides God.
And so they don't want to go that route. But they so I'm going to end up in hell, so I might as well get as far as I can. And that's one of the things we're seeing among some of the Satanists now, is that's why they engage in things like sacrifice and things of that sort, because they're thinking that once they get to hell, they're going to have all this power.
Wow.
But what they don't realize is that something which Satan himself actually once said to me, because I was noticing something in his behavior, because I wrote 3 books in psychology. So one of the things I just started doing is watching patterns of behavior of these guys, and both as individuals and as general a lot of demons. And I said to him, I said, your exercise of power in hell is actually painful, isn't it? It's not pleasant. He says, no, I hate it. He says, I use it to keep, to try and protect myself, but I hate it.
This is a fascinating idea. Like, where and when is he having these conversations with the devil? Like, is it through another person where he's claiming to have conversations, or is it literally the force of the devil, the spiritual being right there? I want to know. I would love to know. Comment down below your thoughts on where in the world is he having these conversations?
And so they don't seem to realize that they might get a certain amount of delight in having all this power in this life, but even if they have it in the next, they'll be miserable. And they don't see it.
They're miserable in this life too.
They are miserable, but they think it's going to be like this life.
So this is a fascinating thing now. Now they're going to go to the end times predictions, and it'll be interesting to hear a Catholic's perspective on the end times. I rarely hear this, so it'll be fascinating. He talks about the mark of the beast, temple, and then I'm going to give my opinion all the way through. Let's watch. This is fascinating.
What would the correction be? Is it going to be a correction, or are we approaching end times?
Well, ultimately, we don't really have any certitude. I mean, it could be the type of thing that it's the situation for the Antichrist is just about present. The Antichrist has to be able to rule the world. He's not going to rule through governance. He's going to rule it through economies. And so, even though he'll have control of the governments too, but the Antichrist would actually, when he appears, there has to be a unification of the worldwide economy in order for him.
Which is really similar to a lot of people say he's going to be in charge of the currency and you can't buy and sell, obviously, which is fascinating. So he's saying it's not as much about governancy, the government. Interesting.
To a degree that's a little bit farther down the road than ours is at this point. So I don't think that he's just immediately around the corner, but I could be wrong.
He could be. That's what I'm saying.
The other way that it can actually happen is there's been numerous prophecies by saints, apparitions where Our Lady's appeared, like at Fatima, where 3 children saw her, but then there was a miracle of the sun where 70,000 people saw this miracle that actually happened there. Where, so there's some of those apparitions, she actually talks about the fact that one of them is La Salette, where she said there's going to be a chastisement that's going to come. And that chastisement will be a minor chastisement, but it's going to be the type of thing where, excuse me, we're going to see infrastructure. God's going to basically allow some type of war or something that's going to happen to such a degree that, it's going to be brutal even for us who are good and who are prepped and ready for it and all of that.
Dang, what is going on right now, guys? A war. I'm praying that it's not brutal for Christians. I pray, who knows? That's why, this is a time where we got to keep on trusting in Jesus and live for him and know that he's good above all else during the good and the bad. And that's why we can have peace, because we trust in Jesus.
Be brutal for everybody.
When you say, I can't remember how you said it, but you said it sounded like you were saying the stage is kind of set. Yeah. Almost everything that's happened needs to happen.
Everyone's saying
what
that.
What has happened that needed to happen, and what still needs to happen?
Well, before the Antichrist comes, one of the things that we know from the fathers of the church is that there will be a worldwide implosion of people's morality. So, which we've seen, right?
Yeah.
So that's happened since the 1950s.
It's happening right now.
There's been an implosion where people just aren't following the laws of God or the natural law in any sense of the term. So we have that. The other part of it is, again, is the unification of the worldwide economies, because he has to be able to basically control people en masse. The other thing is too is it has to be something that the people that are alive, that in order to survive, you have to be able to plug into that economy in some fashion. That's why they talk about the mark of the beast. Well, we're almost there, where they could literally just decide,
Yep.
look, unless you're going to sign off on certain things, you're not going to have access to the
That's
digital
scary.
currency that we're going to enact world.
They could easily do that. They've already done that with COVID. If you did not have your COVID card, you weren't allowed to go into certain restaurants. I was a DoorDash driver in 2020 in Minneapolis trying to pick up groceries or trying to pick up orders from restaurants, and they wouldn't let you in unless you had a mask or your card. That was legitimately happening in Minneapolis.
And therefore, because that's how he could rule it. At least that's my opinion. I think that's one of the ways how he's going to control people is through digital currencies, and he's going to just shut people off, and that's how they'll be able to basically starve people out if they're unwilling to sign off on the Antichrist's rules. So it's going to be those kinds of things have, as I mentioned, have come into play.
So we're talking like social credit score.
Yeah, that's right, among other things. The other thing is too, is we also know that.
Oh, that happened all the time. China's doing that right now with social credit scores.
In the military, you've probably seen this too. The tighter you put your grip on a group of people, the more stuff slips through your fingers. And so I think that type of thing, there will be ways in which people will be able to survive. But I think they also have to be smart about it and actually learn just basic survival skills, learn how to fend for themselves just based on nature and things.
Fishing and hunting. Who knows how to fish and hunt? I've done that a little bit. I'm probably not very good. Last time I went hunting, I was 16. And the only time I shot anything, I was 12. I can fish, though, too. Not the best.
But I think it's going to become extraordinarily difficult, especially with the way the technology is getting, to be able to even evade detection.
Yep.
I think so too. I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
One more question. I've always heard about the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play into the end?
Well, the
golden calf.
obviously the difficulty with the golden calf in the Old Testament is that they basically created a god of their own making, and so this is the same type of thing that you're going to see in relationship to the Antichrist. He will basically ensconce himself as the one to whom we are to worship.
Yep.
The difficulty with the Antichrist, of course, is he's going to be perfectly possessed by Satan, and he will be endowed with by perfect possession. Satan will be the one in the driver's seat, so that we'll be dealing with somebody who will be endowed with Satan's intelligence, and as a result of that, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult intellectually to combat this guy without
the Holy Spirit. But a lot of people think that all the Christians will be gone when the Antichrist comes, but then a lot of people don't. I honestly don't know.
Specific graces from God.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move into the outline here.
All right.
So let's start with the 7 forms of diabolic activity.
Yeah.
All right. I want to go to, he talks about the third temple for a little bit. I want to make sure we touch that part. All right. So according to him, he thinks the third temple will never be built, which is completely different than a lot of other Protestants, what they think.
The fathers of the church, at least the ones that I've read, they said the temple will never be rebuilt. And
It will never be
rebuilt. And the reason being is because, first of all, Julian the Apostate tried to rebuild it, and it was destroyed in the process. Christ actually put an end to the Jewish sacrifice on purpose, because the Jewish sacrifice in the Old Testament was a lead up or a prefigurement of Christ.
Okay.
And so he gave them one generation in order for them to convert to Christianity. And when they didn't, he put an end to their sacrifice. So technically speaking, there hasn't been practicing Jews in 2,000 years because the temple hasn't been around. They haven't been able to offer sacrifice. Doesn't mean that they don't pray and things of that sort, but they haven't been able to enact their primary religious duties, which is to offer sacrifice. Plus their Levitic line, which is their priestly line, was destroyed.
But wouldn't they want to offer sacrifices? Don't some Jews want to do that? That's the thing. They're still waiting for their Messiah. And a lot of times people think that the abomination of desolation still needs to happen. Some people think that it happened in 70 AD, but
then, and the difficulty is people tend to misinterpret the book of Daniel, which says when the abomination of desolation takes its seat in the temple. What they don't realize is that is not a reference to the Jewish temple. That's where the The Protestants are getting it wrong. So a lot of the Protestants are thinking, oh, well, let's help the Jews rebuild the temple, and then that will usher in, because Christ is going to return.
A lot of Protestants do think that.
They think the temple is going to be rebuilt. And then as a result of that, I should say, the temple has to be rebuilt in order for the Antichrist to put himself in there. So let's do that so that the Antichrist will come, and then that means that Christ will come. And that's kind of their reasoning behind it. Well, first of all, just getting through the years of the Antichrist is going to be brutal, so I wouldn't be pushing that. But the fathers of the church are very clear that it'll never be rebuilt, and that the reference to the abomination of desolation taking its seat in the temple is actually a reference to the Catholic Church.
Interesting. So from his standpoint, obviously being Catholic, they think that they're the one true church. And that's wild. So he thinks that the abomination of desolation will happen in the Catholic Church. Well, when will you know that's happening? How do you know it hasn't happened now? We don't know. Well, I don't think it has, but to be fair, I'm not speculating right now.
The fathers say it's a reference to that there's going to be some way in which the situation in the church will become compromised to such a degree. It doesn't mean that people have to know it, but its essential elements will still remain intact. But that the Catholic Church itself would become
That's
compromised
wild.
in that process.
That's wild. It's crazy that he's saying that.
Jeez. When we're talking about,
So how would you, at what point would you know that is compromised? I know a lot of Protestants will say that, but I don't think so. Anyway, guys, shout out to Shawn Ryan. The entire video will be in the description below. You can guys go check that out. Very, very fascinating stuff. Anyway, guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, whatever that may be. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And always remember, guys, Jesus loves you. He died on the cross for your sins so that you could be saved. Have an amazing day and God bless.